Good evening, everyone. We're happy to be here. We'll give it a few minutes to let people join, and then once we've got a fair number of people, Dan at the back is going to give me a wave, a nudge.
Thanks for joining in and tuning in, everybody. We've got I'm in front of a live studio audience today.
They want to give us a cheer.
Yeah.
Lovely stuff.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit nervous. Yeah, I am, man. Got some Dutch courage, some alcohol-free beer. Pardon? Yeah, that's what I mean. So yeah, quite excited to
it's gonna be fun.
See what you got to ask me, and then have a chat with all these guys afterwards.
So whilst we're waiting,
yep.
Do you want to tell the audience? We'll probably do this again in a minute. But what? I'm sure everyone knows who you are. But do you want to give yourself a little introduction?
I don't know how to describe it. So, well, my name is Paul Messner. If you tune in, I'm guessing you know that, but I don't know if I'm a what? Bushman. No, it's a different fella, that is. I make YouTube videos. I don't like saying I'm a YouTuber because it seems like something that little kids do, really. What just started out as a hobby, it's just turned into, I'm not going to say career because it's still a hobby, but it allows me to do the things that I want to do and not have to go and work in a factory anymore, really. So it's I just love sharing my adventures and a little bit of information on gear and things like that, and meeting the people. So there's quite a few people in the room today that I've met more than once now, which is lovely. So that's the main thing for me, just getting out there and meeting new people.
Lovely. Perfect. Right, we'll kick it off then. So welcome everybody to our second round of our winter webinars. This is the first for Alpkit. We've never done a winter webinar in person, in store, with a live audience. So it's a really nice thing to do, and it's great to have Paul along for the evening. So we're going to be talking about winter wild camping today. So all things winter wild camping. It's going to be for people who are just getting into it, or for people who are already doing it, but they're trying to find the motivation to get out in these colder months. And I know that like a few years ago when I was first trying to get out, do a first solo, for example, Paul was an inspiration to get out. And I've seen comments on videos, and I'm sure you can all agree that you just need, it's really helpful to see someone else doing it to then go and do it yourself, especially when it's cold outside and it's dark outside and all this. So yeah. But yeah, welcome, Paul.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me. First thing I'd like to say though is that if you're thinking about doing this for the first time and you're looking for inspiration, don't necessarily wait till it's freezing cold, dark nights and blowing a hoolie. You're much better off trying it when the conditions are lovely. You're going to get gorgeous sunsets and sunrises and nice warm temperatures, really. But just because it is cold and wet out there doesn't mean you can't get out and enjoy yourself.
So tonight we're going to be covering 4 rough topic areas, and the first one that I'll start touching on is probably quite a sensitive subject of is wild camping illegal? So we're going to look into the current laws around wild camping and how to respect our outdoor spaces, really, and get Paul's opinion on it. And I know you spoke a lot about it on YouTube, and I think it's very widely spoken across the whole outdoor community, really. So we'll kick it off with what are the laws with wild camping across the UK?
So it varies depending on where you are. So Scotland, they've got part of their Land Reform Act. Don't want to get too much into detail, but within reason, they're allowed to go and wild camp pretty much anywhere they want. You can't go and camp on somebody's back garden or something like that. But if you want to climb up on Ben Nevis, you're allowed to pitch your tent there, no questions asked. In Dartmoor, it's the only place in the rest of the UK, and that's not everywhere. There's certain areas where you're allowed to go and pitch your tent. There are certain regulations around it. I'm not sure exactly what they are, but you're not allowed to spend more than 2 nights there or whatever it is. You still got to stay out of certain areas because there's a big military area around there as well. But for the rest of the UK, so which is the Peak District, the Lake District, Snowdonia, Brecon Beacons, things like that, it's not strictly legal to go camping there. However, certain places, like in the Lake District, for example, they do tolerate wild camping because it's part of long distance hikes and things like that. As long as you follow the wild camping code, as they call it, where you leave no trace, you pitch late, you leave early, you pitch your tent above the highest fell wall, and you're not near any footpaths, things like that. But places like the Peak District, so for example, they don't actually endorse that at all. So camping in the Peak District, they say it's illegal, but it's not a criminal offence. So if you're pitched up on Kinder Scout, a policeman's not going to walk by and arrest you for it. It's a civil matter. So if the landowner comes over and says to you, "We'd like you to move, this is our land," then you should respect his wishes and get off the land, really. But as long as that's safe, of course, if he's coming at 2 o'clock in the morning and it's blowing a gale and things like that, and it's not safe to do so, then I would argue your case in a nice manner. Just say, "I'm sorry for being here. First thing in the morning, I'll pack up. I've not left any mess or anything like that." The problem is that some people are pitching their tents in easily accessible areas. So it's literally maybe 100 yards away from the car on the banks of Lady Bower Reservoir, something like that. And the wardens, the National Trust Rangers, things like that can easily get to you and say, "You shouldn't be here." And they want to move you on. And the problem is that they don't want you to. There's certain types of wild campers, shall we say, that just want to come, light a fire, drink lots of beer, and mess the land up, really. That's not what I'm about. I'm part of look after the land, leave no trace, things like that. Like most people are, but it's the fly tippers, as they call it. They're the ones that are sort of ruining it for the rest of us. So I would like to see, us have some sort of laws like they've got in Scotland, where you've got a little bit more freedom, as long as you're respectful of the land and you look after it, and leave it as you found it.
And obviously, like the old Scottish right to roam, it's really good. Why they're doing it's really great if you're wild camping. But for those that might not be fully in the know on where you can actually legally wild camp in England and Wales, where can you?
But that's the thing. You can legally wild camp if you get permission from the landowner. So that is the first thing they say you should do. But if you're trying to find out, it's difficult to find out who owns the land for starters. And if you write to the National Trust and say, "Is it okay if I camp on your land?" they're just going to say no. Although I put it out there and I encourage people to enjoy the outdoors, because I think the outdoors is for everybody. I think we should all be able to experience a night under the stars if we want to. But the best way to do it is not do what I do, is just get in, go somewhere discreet, enjoy the experience, and get out the next morning. And nobody needs to know you've been there. So that's the advice I give you anyway.
Yeah, perfect. Really good advice. So you touched on it a little bit, but do you want to talk about the whole right to roam in Scotland, and how the rest of the UK would directly benefit from that in a way?
It is a tough one, because although you've got the right to roam in Scotland, so they have had to put restrictions in place in certain places, such as Loch Lomond, for example. They've got areas that have been trashed by people who've just turned up with their car or whatever, chuck beer cans everywhere, fire scars all over the place, and it's caused damage to the environment around there. So those areas you're not allowed to camp anymore. I think that what they need to do is probably educate people more in what leave no trace means, what respect for the environment is. I'm from what's the word? An age group where we weren't really taught as well as the new kids are now. So our children are much more savvy, I think, when it comes to the environmental issues and things like that. So they are probably more respectful than my generation. Although my generation, common sense prevails. So it's one of those things that we just need to educate people so they look after the land, they know the rules. I know it's controversial and might be seen as another tax or something like that, but I'd be all for a little course or something, or maybe a little license like you do when you're fishing. Just to prove that you are going to be respectful or you're going to abide by the laws. And those license fees could potentially help for the upkeep of the pathways and things like that, as well as maybe somebody just to make sure that have a wander around and make sure people are abiding by the rules. The problem is in these easy to reach areas where people are just going just for the barbecue party and then coming away, and it's genuine people that enjoy wild camping that's paying the price for that.
Yeah. And there's lots of organizations out there that are massive advocates for wild camping, and also teaching the whole sort of like leave no trace approach. There's an organization called Trash Free Trails, and they're
Duke of Edinburgh, things
yeah,
like
and then
that.
Duke of Edinburgh, and then a lot of YouTube as well, like Paul will be massive advocates for it. And then Alpkit, when we put in some content out, or we're putting out blogs, we'll put out blogs about how to wild camp and how to respect the outdoors, and just so that you can have these nice places and that everyone can appreciate them.
There's lots of people like myself that film their trips and adventures and post it onto Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, things like that. And I don't see any of them lighting fires, trashing the place, leaving beer cans everywhere. So I don't necessarily think it's the people like me that's the problem. There's always been people that have trashed things. We were discussing something on our little podcast thing where me and my wife, whereas back in the day, me and Stephen Reed, we would go out as kids in the woods and stuff like that and make fires and dens and things like that. And I wasn't educated in leave no trace and things like that then. And through experience and growing up, I've learned to look after the land. So I've not always been an angel. When I was a little lad, I might have been a tearaway. But we just need to educate people and get them to look after the planet.
Yeah, and hopefully with the way social media is going and the way the reach is going,
but that's what we're trying to.
People will get to.
We're trying to promote that the leave no trace thing. We've got hats, t-shirts that say leave no trace. We just want to get that logo and that message out there, and use something. I've seen one of the posters in store today that says they want you to leave some trace, and it mentions like planting trees, and so it's showing where you've actually improved the environment as opposed to leaving your litter around.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like changing people's mindsets to, because that can be an issue as well, like people's mindset to being connected with the outdoors. They might not just respect the outdoors because they're not really, they've not grown up around the outdoors, or they might have been in an area where they've not seen that you have to respect it. So if you change their mindset to respecting that space, then that's when they'll start to keep it clean and and stuff like that. So for those that are getting into wild camping, or even already wild camping, how would you approach a wild camp, and what would you do before you set off?
You need to do your homework a little bit. So I'm assuming that you've got all of the right gear. So you need to do a little bit of research when it comes to equipment. There are lots of places you could go. There's stores like this where they've got people who are genuine outdoors people that know about the equipment. Really, there's lots of information out there from even the mountain rescue teams and stuff like that. Go on their websites, they're telling you what sort of kit you need to be taking when you're going in the great outdoors. You need to be able to plan your route. You need to be able to navigate, basically. And ensure the equipment that you've got is suitable for the conditions that you're going to be out there in.
Right. And for touching on the wild camping point, obviously it's really dark now and it's getting cold. What other things would you do around that, those sort of conditions, really? If
you're new to it, then you can practice for starters. Don't go and just buy a load of kit and then head up Ben Nevis and then try and pitch a tent on it. You need to ensure that your equipment's good. We're not far away from lots of little Peak District campsites, such as going to Edale. I bet there's 3 or 4 campsites around that area where you're in the sort of environment where you want to be wild camping. You're going to get the same sort of weather exposure, bar some of the mega serious winds. But you can test your equipment in a controlled environment. So your car can be there. You can have spare set of dry clothes. If your tent gets destroyed by the wind, you can get in your car and go home. You know, you don't want to find out at the top of a mountain that the gear that you've took isn't up to the job.
Well, there's nothing worse there, and you've got a hole in your ground sheet or a tear in your tent, or if you put your tent up wrong and your tent's blown over,
or you forget your poles.
or you forget your poles. Well, yeah, prepare. Always be prepared. That's the moral of the story there. Yeah, triple check your bag before you go out.
Yeah,
there's nothing worse than leaving your pillow at home.
I've been doing it for 10 years plus now, and there's still occasions that I forget things. Now I should have a checklist, and I advocate having a checklist, but I don't use one myself, so I don't practice what I preach. I think part of the reason is for me. So most people, they've got a good set of equipment that they can use for all seasons, or they'll use certain kit for one season and then upgrade to the colder weather kit for the next season. Whereas doing what I do, I tend to mix my kit up that much that I'll use this tent one week, I'll use this head torch the following week, whatever it will be. And that's when you tend to forget stuff if you've got too much going on. So, you know, simplify things. You don't need 10 tents, you don't need 10 sleeping bags. Wife's at the back there just going, oh. Yeah, finally, she says. But yeah, you just need to be able to trust in the kit that you've got, but make sure that it works for you.
Well, speaking of gear, that leads us nicely into the next part of the webinar. So what do you need to take? So looking at what gear you need for a winter wild camp, really. So what are the fundamental bits of gear, really?
Well, pretty much all year round, you're going to be needing the same sort of equipment, really. The only difference is in colder weather, you need something that's going to insulate you more. You may need a little bit of extra clothing to keep you warm, but most situations you're going to need a shelter that's going to stand up to the conditions that you're in. Not all tents are equal, so you can go and buy a tent for about £10 from a thrift store, whatever they call them, or a bargain store. That they use for festivals and things like that. These are not made for camping on a mountain or on a windy fell. You know, they'll have cheap fiberglass poles that will just break in a slightest gust. So make sure that your tent's up to the job. In colder weathers, you might want to look at a 4-season tent, but you can still get away with some 3-season tents all year round. The 4-season element is usually for heavy snow loads, and it also means that the tent fly sheet normally goes to the ground, so you're more protected from drafts and the wind, so it keeps the colder elements out. So you've got your shelter. You also need a good sleeping bag. So again, not all sleeping bags are equal. You will find that the more reputable brands will give you a comfort rating, which has been tested. So yeah, it's the comfort rate that you're bothered about. So some of them will say an extreme rating. Now, if you're sleeping at the extreme rating of your sleeping bag, you're going to be in for a really bad night. It's extreme means that you don't die within a certain amount of time. But you're not going to be comfortable. Different manufacturers have different things. I think you guys at Alpkit have like when it comes to the wind, you have like the real feel to see how cold it is. Yeah. You've got like I can't remember what it's called now, the Alpkit something comfort rating.
Comfort rating.
Yeah, it's basically what most people would feel comfortable in. So but the sleeping bag is only half of your sleeping kit. So it's also important to be insulated from the ground. So if you're sleeping on your sleeping bag just directly on the ground, then all of that insulation is going to be squashed by your back. So you may as well just be laid on the ground, other than the ground sheet of your tent stopping you getting wet. So you will lose all of that heat through conduction. Yeah. So you need a good sleeping pad of some description. So that can be anything from a closed cell foam mat, which is like these foamy rubber things, to an insulated inflatable pad that you can get. So, and these are measured by something called R value. So the R value basically says how much heat can be lost through that sleeping pad at a certain temperature. So the higher the R value, the colder you can sleep in, basically. So you need to make sure that that is also rated to the conditions that you're going to be in. Take some of these temperatures as well with a little pinch of salt. So if you're going to be sleeping at -10 and you're buying a sleeping bag that says -10 comfort and a sleeping pad that's -10 comfort, you may still feel the cold a little bit.
Yeah, it's always in the most optimal conditions.
Yeah,
for that. So
and everyone's different. So some
Yeah.
people sleep really warm, some people sleep really cold. So it's like Jo, for example, she could have a -40 sleeping bag and still be cold. So it's just how she is. But yeah, and then there's other things as well. So you need to consider that you've got warm, dry clothes to have once you're in your tent. So we're in that time of year where it's cold, it's wet. So even when you're hiking up, you've got your waterproofs on. You're still going to get moisture on you from the inside of your waterproofs as well. So when you get to your tent, you want to be able to change into something dry. Maybe get one of the down jackets on, something like that, to give you some insulation. And just keep you warm. So keeping warm is the important thing. Warm and dry.
So we'll focus in then on like some individual things. But typically for you, what would you find in your rucksack on a winter's
camp?
Like
Okay.
what sort of?
So I mentioned tent and the sleeping kit. I will have some sort of a round camp jacket, whether that be a down jacket, just a micro down jacket, or maybe a Primaloft jacket, something like that. And it's dark nights this time of year, so head torch. I always take a stove with me so I can get a hot drink. So a hot drink is like a massive morale booster when you're freezing cold. When you just pitch your tent, you usually find that your fingers don't want to move or anything like that. So
gloves is
gloves.
Yeah.
There's some like mittens here. So these gloves are great, but I find that my fingers still get cold in gloves, whereas mittens, you can move your fingers more together and you can keep them warm. You can also shove a hand warmer thing in there, and it just warms everything up in a one-off. You look like you're about 6 years old, and if you're wearing mittens, but I find that they work great for me in the really colder weather. Socks. If you've got cold feet, it's really hard to warm your feet up again. So sometimes get some nice warm socks on, preferably wool socks if possible. Merino wool's really good for those kind of things. Cotton is a big no-no for me in cold weather, because once cotton gets damp, it just saps the heat out of you. It's a killer, basically. Things like that.
We just had a question come through from the guy Adam. He says, "Do you keep a little nightcap in your rucksack?"
As in drink nightcap, or a little cap.
A little nightcap in your rucksack. Must be.
I've got a little hip flask that sometimes I have as a nightcap. Although alcohol's not really recommended. It does warm your throat up a little bit, but it's not good for your body core temperature. So, although I do like the odd beer around the campsite, it's not optimal to do that, to be honest with you. You're better off with a cup of decaf tea or something like that. I'm on decaf now, by the way. Terrible.
Get you back on the on the caffeine.
So but as in caps, I've got two beanies. I always take two beanies. One that I wear if I'm walking up, then it gets hot, sweaty and wet. Then I've got a clean, dry one to put on when I'm in my tent, because you lose so much heat from your top of your head, especially if you've got no hair. Not so bad for you, but I lose a lot of heat that way.
I'm sure I've got a few years though until well, you never know. Could be in a few years when I'm
Good question.
But so sleeping bags. There are lots of sleeping bags. You've got down, you've got synthetic, you've got 3 season, 4 season. Sometimes when people go to buy sleeping bags, we just get fatigued by choice. So obviously down's got its benefits, synthetic's got its benefits. Why would you use one or the other?
For the most part, when it comes to cold weather, I use a down sleeping bag, mainly because it's got the highest warmth to weight ratio. Also, so if you wanted a sleeping bag, for example, that's synthetic that goes down to -5 degrees comfortably, it's going to be the size of this, because it's really, really difficult to get something that warm and synthetic that compresses so much. Whereas a down bag, depending what the fill is, I'll save that for another conversation. But you can squash the down bag to a really small thing, and then it lofts up. That down traps all the warm air, and it keeps you warm. But you just have to bear in mind that you have to keep the down dry. I know that a lot of sleeping bags that you do, especially they have like a down treatment on them, don't they?
Yeah,
so
hydrophobic down.
Hydrophobic down, so it means that it does get a little bit wet, then it's still all moist, because it's very difficult as well to avoid condensation in these sort of conditions. So you've got the really cold air outside, and then you've got the warmer air from your breath and from your body and stuff inside your little microclimate of a tent. And then when that reaches or hits your fly sheet or anything on the surface, like the edge of your sleeping bag, then that suddenly condenses and gets moisture there.
Yeah, and then, well, it's the thing is that you get condensation on the inside. And
the difference is with the synthetic bags that they retain more insulation value if they're wet. So, I'm not sure the exact, like wool, for example, a wool blanket, if you've got a really good wool blanket, you can have that wet through and it still have something like 80% of its insulation properties, which is phenomenal. But you'd need a rucksack that's about 150 litres just to carry a blanket that'll keep you that warm. So it's different materials have different properties, and it's about striking the balance of what you want to carry versus how warm you want to be. But if you down that you can get that's been treated, and that is, I find that keeps you warmer, for me anyway, because you can get more bang for your book, more insulation for your book.
But then, like with bivvying, typically you'd use a synthetic, because within a bivvy,
I've used down as well, but like you say, a bivvy is a real microclimate. So literally you're going. So winter tents tend to be more double skinned. So you have the outer skin, which is the flies, where your condensation and moisture forms. And then you get the inner tent, which is that saves the condensation dripping on you and getting you wet through. Bivvy bag, you've got the elements more or less touching your bag. So that's why you need maybe a synthetic bag is better for that. But it's going to be bulky.
So when people are heading out, what sort of tent would they go for? Because you've got all these tents. You've got super lightweight one-man tents, or you've got your more heavy tents, but they're geodesic, non-geodesic tunnel tents. Can be quite confusing when you come to it. But what's best for wild camping, especially in the winter?
So you can, if you wanted to, you could just sleep without a shelter. Hopefully your sleeping bag and your sleeping mat is what's going to do is there to keep you warm. But your tent also, it's stopping all them elements coming around you. So you are better off with a 4-season tent. And in the wind, the 4-season tent will come down to the ground normally. So it stops all of the wind and drafts coming in. The geodesic tents that you mentioned, so they are ones where you get more poles that cross over, and that ultimately gives your tent more stability in the wind. So you can get some real flimsy tents out there that might have just one pole, trekking pole tents that I think you do some of those.
We've got both.
They're reasonably sturdy, but I'd be tempted in this kind of weather, not just the geodesic, just because of the strength and structure, but I'd necessarily go for maybe something a little bit bigger as well, because you're going to be spending potentially from 4 o'clock in the evening, which is dark, till 8 o'clock in the morning, which is dark, and it's a long time to be in a little tiny coffin tent. You want to be able to move around, spread out a little bit, get comfortable, change your clothes as well. So if you've got wet through clothes and you want to be camping in a bivvy, you've got to try and get changed and into a bivvy bag whilst exposed to the elements. So a bit of space and something strong, and then close the inner as well. So 3-season tents sometimes have mesh inners, or mainly have mesh inners, which allows in lots of drafts. If you've got a solid inner, then again it creates that little warmer climate inside, which helps keep you warm.
Well, it's good to know, because I learned the hard way. We got absolutely freezing, and also forgot my gloves. So that was good fun.
Yeah,
Trying
yeah.
to get it down in 2 degrees, and yeah, you're there like, and then you're trying to put peg out. It's
That's the thing. So if your fingers, you need to be quick. You need to practice as well. So make sure you know how to pitch your tent and get it so you can do it as quick as possible, because you don't want to be exposing fingers and toes and stuff to the elements for too long.
Well, I think we've covered the gear there really. So then we'll move on to eating food, hillside hunger. So basically, how to best stay fueled on the hill. I know you've got a track record for taking kitchen worthy meals with you, but I
don't know. I get slated sometimes.
Yeah,
So it doesn't matter. I can be cooking fillet steak or something, and somebody will say in the comments, "You've murdered that steak." Well, why did you put? You've wasted fillet steak by putting seasoning on it. And I'm thinking, it's my steak. I'm going to eat it. I'll eat it how I want it. But it is what it is. You put yourself out there, you're going to get a little bit of criticism, aren't you? But yeah, just because you're outdoors doesn't mean that you have to eat poorly. So I think you do a little bit of stuff with Harrison as well.
Yeah.
The Fell Foodie. So he's a friend of ours, and he's just recently released a cookbook of all the stuff that he cooks out on the hills, which is brilliant. So he can 3-course meals, 4-course meals. I think the best one that I've had, or we've had, was I took my wife on a honeymoon while camping, which is you enjoyed it, didn't you? Yeah. So I did take her to Italy afterwards. So, but the first one was while camping, and we had king prawns and scallops in like a sweet chili sauce, followed by fillet steak, asparagus, mushrooms. We couldn't manage the pudding, could we? But but that was cooked between 2 stoves, a little camp stove, something like that, and a couple of little lightweight frying pans. So there's no reason why you can't eat well when you're out camping. I regularly take steak out and cook that, but for convenience sake, you can still buy the dehydrated stuff if you want to, which doesn't taste the same as steak. I'm going to put it out there, but sometimes, especially multi-day trips, you just want something that you can pour boiling water into, set it aside for 10 minutes, and then you've got a hot meal. Because again, that is massive morale boosting when you're freezing cold, that you can have something hot to eat. It's also good for your metabolism and keeping you warm when when you're getting into bed at night.
What is your favorite dehydrated?
I've gone off them a little bit now, to be honest with you. I decided I'm going to try and avoid them a bit, but you can pay top dollar for them. If you're going down that route, you may as well have a pot noodle or something like that, I suppose, and
you've got
save your money. But given the choice, I'd have a steak. One thing to consider though, when there's different types of stove as well. So we mentioned earlier on, you've got a lovely little tiny wood stove in there. If you're in a tent, you don't want to be using anything like that inside a tent, because it's dangerous. There's a massive safety element in there when it comes to to using a stove.
That's another thing, obviously, like with people cooking, sometimes the weather outside can be horrendous, or it can be amazing. But for the weather where you want to be in the tent, I know there's a lot of miseducation around whether or not you can cook in your tent.
Yeah.
And I know you've done a video about it.
Yeah, and again,
that's a hot topic.
It split the room. It's one of those things. Ultimately, I can't recommend that you cook your food in your tent, because the stoves can give off carbon monoxide. There's also the risk of something catching fire. If you only need to slightly touch your fly sheet with the flame, and although they've got the fire retardant things, but your tent's gone, as well as whatever else is in there. But ultimately, they would never have climbed Everest if they never cooked inside the tent. They can't go out and say, I'm just going to pop out in -50 or whatever and just make a pot noodle. It's one of those, you've got to be able to do it, but there's a safe way of doing it. So you do need to ventilate. You do need to choose the right fuel for cooking with. Never ever use a stove as a heater. There's some people that think you can just leave your gas stove running all night and it'll keep your tent warm, but that's a recipe for carbon monoxide poisoning. So you need to be really careful. So all I'm going to say is that, although I'm not going to recommend it, if you say there's things like the table, so you can get a little folding table that will give your stove a bit more stability. These kind of stoves they're called remote stoves, I think.
Get it so people can see it. This is our Coro.
So they've got like a lower center of gravity, so you can get some, jet boil ones that they're quite top heavy sometimes, and if you're on uneven ground, they can easily fall over. Whereas these ones, they're more stable. You can also, so in cold weather, gas canister stoves don't perform very well, and you can find that your stove starts sputtering to the point where it suddenly stops because the vaporized gas doesn't work properly. So this kind of stove, you can actually invert the gas canister, so you are running off the liquid fuel instead of the vaporized fuel. There's a little preheating element here which then vaporizes it, so you've got a constant flame all the time in lower temperatures. So these sort of things are much better for low temperature cooking anyway. So
to buy Coro.
Awesome. Other brands are available.
We're not here, just Alpkit. Yeah. So yeah, well you've touched those there really.
Yeah.
For all year round though, what's the best sort of, so for someone that they can't afford lots of different stoves, or they just want one setup for all, would you say the Coro is the best win, or would you go for something like an all-in-one system like a brew kit, for example?
I think it's personal preference. It also depends on the sort of things that you're having to eat. So like something like the brew kit where you just want to boil water, it's a good bit of kit. It's got a long tall pot. You can put like one of the boil in the bag meals in there, no problem at all. But they're also really efficient and boil water really quick because of their heat exchanger they've got in the bottom of the pot. So that means you use less fuel. But they won't perform as well in colder weather as that one will. So it's horses for courses, really. I'm fortunate I've got lots of stoves, so I don't have to choose one. But so you're not going to go wrong with either of them. So it's one of those things. I also think that if you're getting into winter camping, you are more, what's the word? More of a not seasoned pro, but you're probably at the next level rather than a beginner. So you're more into the intermediate stuff. So you might want something more like the Coro. But it's also, of course, as either will work, as will a little alcohol burner. So just need to be a little bit more careful with those.
Yeah, well, probably. Yeah, I suppose you just got to make sure you do your practice before you go out there.
The difference with the brew kit and that is you'll have to buy a separate pot for that stove. Whereas the brew kit, everything's all in one, isn't it? Yeah, so it's all integrated. All you need is just some water to put in it and a gas canister. Whereas that you'd probably need a gas canister and a pot of some description. But it gives you the versatility that does of adding other stuff as well, pans and although you can with the brew kit.
Yeah. And then with the more food side of things, like Phil Food, for example, he does a lot of. Sometimes he's an advocate for like pre-prep before you go up to have a nice meal. Do you prep and cook on the hill, or like take?
So I've started doing it differently. So I used to like take the ingredients and then I'd be there like chopping stuff up, and now I chop it up before I go. I've also just bought a new vacuum sealer thing that you can make your own. So if you make a chili con carne at home, which we've got some now, haven't we? I just vacuum pack it, and then I can just use that as a boil in the bag. Just chuck it in the pot, and then I've got fresh cooked meals, and at least that way you know what they are or not what's gone in them, as opposed to some of these dehydrated stuff. Home cooked chili is always going to be a dehydrated one.
Because it keeps it clean.
Yeah, but you can freeze them as well. So if you've got some leftover food from your chili con carne or your spag bowl, just stick it in one of those little vacuum pack things, seal it up. You can even bung it in the freezer and take it out the night before, and go camping. You've got I know you do that, don't you, Andy?
Right.
Yeah. So
I enough leftovers into a Mylar bag and then heat seal it.
Yeah.
Straight in the freezer. Right. Just give it a sharpie. Right. What's on it? Oh, what's in it? And then take it out. Have it that night.
Yeah. But one thing to bear in mind, if you've got something really saucy and you stick it through the vacuum thing, it sucks all the sauce out and makes a mess of your vacuum thing. So yeah, don't make that mistake that I did. But what you can do is you can freeze it first and then vacuum it. If that makes sense. So stand it up in your freezer, vacuum all the air out once it's gone solid. You're not going to lose your sauce that way.
So, what's the best and worst meal you've had
Oh,
on
the best meal I've already mentioned it
Yeah.
is my honeymoon meal, as in that sort of camp meal. To be fair, when I've been doing my bushcraft stuff, some of the feasts that I've had with there's just meat going on the fire, there's cheese, pork, you name it, it all comes out.
Wow.
So it's a different level, but you're not far from your car. You can take all of these different things with you then.
Mm.
The worst I've had, I bought from a store not too far from here, and it was like one of these ration pack ones where you pour a bit of water in, and there's a chemical reaction on a pad which is supposed to reheat your food, a bit like what the army have. And it was a beef stroganoff, and I was thinking to scout in the winter under a tarp, and I thought I'll have this beef stroganoff. The thing didn't work properly, so I had lukewarm stroganoff, but it was gristle. It was just, the beef wasn't beef. In fact, I've got no idea. It could have been anything but beef. It was disgusting. So I went to bed that night cold, hungry, and then spent a night holding a trekking pole like that while the tarp was shaking in the wind. So it was an experience, we'll say. Puts hairs on your chest.
So yeah, just do honeymoon meals and then
Honeymoon
you're
meals.
sorted for
Yeah.
more wild camping.
Although that wasn't total walk in the park, the next morning the wind flattened our tent, so it was literally as soon as we got out of the tent, the wind came in really bad and just flattened it. So you've got to make sure your kit's up for the job. That wasn't forecast either.
Yeah.
That's a big thing for winter camping. Don't trust the weather forecast.
Yeah.
So you can look at different apps, different weather forecast providers, and they'll all say something different, and half the time they're all wrong. So you've got to prepare for worst case scenario.
Always, especially I think that one that I've always, especially people that go more lightweight, they go for a very lightweight setup because they're doing through hikes or long walks in, or they're doing ultra distance stuff. Very easy to think, oh, I don't need that jumper or I don't need that jacket, and then you really suffer from it, and that's when things do go wrong, and that's when, so even for the most experienced of people, they can get called out. The MRT can get called out for.
You need to bear in mind the equipment that you've got. So you can still use ultralight kit, you can still use lighter weight kit in the winter, but you just need to be more savvy when it comes to choosing the pitch location and whether you've got protection from the wind, things like that. Some of these ultralight tents are never going to take 50-mile-an-hour gusts, so you just pick the equipment or the location based on what kit you've got.
So that leads us nicely into winning winter camping. So your top tips and tricks for camping. So yeah, tips for making it memorable, really. What
Okay.
do you go for?
Get something it's long nights inside your tent. So like I say, you can be in there from 4 o'clock in the evening, sometimes until 8 in the morning, apart from popping out for a call of nature if you've got to. But I'll give you a tip on that in a bit. And yeah, get something to entertain yourself. So I've got a little DAB radio that I take. So sometimes listen to radio. You can download podcasts. Got a new podcast if anyone wants to watch that. Shameless plug.
Yeah.
Messner Outdoors. Yeah, download YouTube videos. So you find that you don't get signal in some of these places as well. So if you've got Netflix or YouTube, whatever it is, you can download your content so you can watch something on your phone. Make sure you've got a power bank with you so you can keep your things charged up as well.
That's for safety reasons, as well, really, isn't it? Just always having charging your phone. Or...
Yeah. That's just take a book, something like that. These are just things to keep you entertained. But make sure you've got a change of clothes, so something dry to get into. You don't want to be spending the night in the clothes that you've been wet through in all day. So socks, massive thing to get some nice camp socks, or you can get like little down boot things or something like that. Just once you got cold feet, you're in trouble. Little things to warm you up. So like these. So if you've got your water in there, you can pour some into your pot, heat it up, pour the hot water back in here, make sure it's nice and tight, and hold it against you. So you've got a bit like a hot water bottle. You can stick that inside a socket if you want. You need a reasonable quality one of these. You don't want them doing it in a Buxton little flimsy plastic water bottle. It'll just melt. You could even put that into the bottom of your sleeping bag, you know, so you can get your feet warmed up. These are a very versatile bit of kit. You can also, as long as you can kneel up, well, this is one for the blokes, I'm afraid. If you don't want to get out in the cold wind and rain, you could also just like take the lid off and empty one of these and fill it up. I'll let you use your imagination. Pardon? Oh dear.
Yeah.
Sheepies.
Sure is, yeah.
Wow. I've been living under a rock, haven't I? I've got what's it, like a B&Q funnel thing there. No, not really. Yeah, but with these bottles, I take a couple of these. Take note of the colour of the top. You want one. I think I did a joke in one of my videos where yeah, green for go means you can drink it. Get one with a red top. That's a no go. If you can get one with a red top. Yeah, and then just empty them out the next morning. Top tips.
Okay. Really good tips. Keeping, obviously you've touched on keeping warm. Packing, really. Right. Do you pack your stuff into little down bags so it's all organized so that when you get to camp, you're putting stuff out of your bag? And because there's nothing worse than having your tent or your sleeping bag, the thing that you need at the bottom of your bag.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you need to pack your bag in some kind of order. The last thing you want is having your tent at the bottom of your bag, getting to the top of the hill, wanting to pitch it. It's blowing a hoolie and you're having to like reach stuff out. You've got stuff blowing all over the place. So shelter needs to be at the top. I know a lot of people will strap it to their bag somewhere or put it in the side pocket. However you want to do it, you want to be able to get your shelter up first. I don't use that many of the little dry bag things. I use some. So I've got one that's got like my tools and stuff in. So power banks, bits and bobs, might have a spare beanie hat, lantern. You need a lantern of some description because it's going to be dark for most of the time that you're camping. Sleeping bag though, I don't bother with. I do have one big pack liner, so I shove that inside my pack so that waterproofs my pack, and then I shove my sleeping bag in first, goes right to the bottom, and that just like spreads out and fills all of the nooks and crannies and things like that. Then I'll put my sleeping pad in, and then I'll work my way up. So there'll be my food bag, whatever it will be, stove, things that I don't need first. And then things like down jacket, I just shove them all down the little gaps and stuff like that. As long as it's inside the dry liner, everything's going to be dry when you get there. There's odd things. I'm one of these that I don't like to have that much on the outside of my pack. I always imagine them like one of these hobos or something. You know, if you see people with like stuff strapped to the sides and pots and pans. That was the first time I went wild camping. I had 120 litre Bergen, packed to the rafters with pots and stuff rattling on the outside. I looked an idiot, I think, and my back was broken when I got there. But that taught me some things, and then I was glad that I took extra, you know, because if I needed it, I knew I had it. I would have hated to get somewhere and not realize that I didn't have enough clothes, or because you're freezing. You need to. I'd start with too much, and then you start to whittle out the things that you don't need. Although I don't recommend 120 litre Bergen with the kitchen sink in it. Like I said, I never tested my stuff on campsites really, and that's one thing that I do recommend, because you can get a feel for it and you can get to see how your gear performs without having to all the stress and strain of getting up a mountain or whatever it is.
And then for people starting out sort of like first time, obviously no aspect about and stuff like that. First time going out in the dark, or they're just going out for their own wild camp, or even first time. Actually, we'll go with first time wild camping.
Yep.
Do you think going out with someone who's done it before, like,
Oh,
or go with friends? Or go in
absolutely.
groups,
So the things you can do to start off with is do like a recce beforehand. So go to the area where you're thinking of camping. Go and find somewhere that you feel comfortable leaving your car. Because that's always a big worry for people, is it? Am I scared to leave my car in a lay-by? So yeah, I don't want to leave my car in a lay-by. I'd rather walk an extra couple of miles and have my car in a safe area. So that's just me. Go and scout a few potential campsites, because you want a backup plan, because it's quite popular around here now. The amount of times I've been to my campsite and someone else is already there. So you've got to have a few backup plans as well. So you've got to plot your route. So you have some sort of navigation, learn to read a map, how to use a compass. To start off with, stick to something that's maybe a popular path, so it's easy to get now. So getting up onto Kinder Scout from, say, Edale, you can follow the Pennine Way, get up to Jacob's Ladder, and then you can just wander off a little bit and find somewhere really easily. But going with someone else is a great idea. You're sharing the burden. If anything goes wrong, let's say your tent fails for whatever reason, and they've got a 2-man tent, you can always squeeze in them with them an emergency.
And sharing the experience.
Yeah, and it's lonely, especially at first time. So some people go like woodland camping for the first time, and there's lots of little things that live in the woods, and it's not very much, but you can hear maybe a little mouse that's 100 yards away, and it sounds like a grizzly bear. So you start to, what was that? What was this? And you're panicking over nothing. So one of my early camps, up on Kinder Scout, I heard this noise and I didn't know what it was. It sounded terrifying, but there was a little beetle that was just crawling up the fly, the inner mesh. But it was one of these beetles about, the black ones about that big, about an inch long. But it sounded terrible because there wasn't a breath of wind or anything like that. So I'm used to that kind of thing now, but if you're not used to it, it's very different to sleeping in your bed, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, the slightest of noises when you first go out.
Yeah,
makes you
but
wait.
But on the other hand, you're more likely to get run over because people worry that what if there's an axe murderer out there or something like that. I've never bumped into one of them up on the hills. They just don't accidentally wander by. So don't be afraid, but just expect to hear a few noises that you've not heard of. The scariest thing up on in the Peak Districts when you're walking around and then you startle a grouse, and it does that, and you jump a mile. Honestly, that's the scariest thing you're going to encounter up there.
Oh well, they're keeps you alive and keeps you living. So I suppose I think we've covered quite a lot there, and I think anyone who's watching this now could probably go out for a wild camp fairly well prepared.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
But we've got questions. Obviously got people here. We've got a few from people on the webinar. I'll just go through a few.
How many people is on the webinar? Does it say?
How many people? Over.
Ooh, wow.
So we've quite a fair few signed in, which is nice. It's good. So you've touched some of them, but some of them was like, were you nervous when you first started wild camping? If so, how did you overcome that?
Absolutely, but it wasn't quite so bad for me because I started with the bushcraft stuff first. So I joined a group. So we had bushcraft meets, and there was probably 10 people that were camping in the same sort of area. We sat around the campfire and that before. So it's campfires, by the way, is not something you want to be doing up on the hills and mountains around here. Yeah, we don't have fires or anything like that. But this was on a permissive woodland where we're allowed to do that. So I got used to the outdoors and sleeping outdoors before I was in a tent on my own. But you still have those nerves and things. But I just chose somewhere that was close by, easy. I knew how to get home quickly if I wanted to. If it wasn't for me, I'd pack up and go home, which
exactly.
I've had to do before actually. Yeah.
And just always tell someone where you're going, if that helps comfort you, or like you say, just go with somebody else the first time.
Yeah.
But it's just taking that step, and you'll never regret it really.
Most people that do it love that experience for me. So Joe's been wild camping with me before. I think her first experience was up on Arthur's Pike in the Lake District, and it was below freezing. And she tells a tale. She makes it sound worse than it is, but her hair was frozen to the tent. And but she was cold and a bit wet at times, but on the way down, she said, "I've never felt more alive than that." So it was worth every minute. So you don't know if you don't try. We're put on this planet to experience more than sleeping in a dream's bed or something like that. We are meant to be part of the natural environment in some way. That's why we were put here. So experience it.
And then sort of when it is cold, or when it's raining or any of these adverse weather conditions, sometimes things can go wrong.
Yeah.
What kit do you have to help deal with those emergencies, or what do you? I know emergencies. It's quite a broad topic area, but
if it's a real emergency and you can't get off you need to get off the area, the mountain or whatever it be, and you need help, then obviously you can dial 999 or 112, which is the national emergency thing, and they'll get the mountain rescue out to you. I always carry a satellite communicator as well. They're not for everybody, but for me, I get out there a lot, and it's my insurance policy. So if you drive your car a lot, you've got to have insurance for it, haven't you? So that means that at any one time, I can always message Joe just to let her know that I'm okay. I can send her my location so she can track me if she needs to, whether you've got phone signal or not. So, but there's also a dedicated SOS button, so someone can come and save me if need be. There's certain equipment that you can use. So if your tent would break, for example, you can get pole sleeves that can help repair your tent. You might need you can get something called a little bothy shelter, which is like a little 1 or 2 person shelter that you throw over yourself, and it protects you from the elements. Make sure you've got plenty of warm clothing that is not cotton based. You can put your waterproofs on over your clothes even if it's not raining, because that will create a little sort of microclimate inside, so it will keep you warmer. Head torch. If you need to get off that hill, you need some sort of lighting. Make sure you know the path home. Things like that. Like I say, if you go with somebody else, then it halves can double your problem, I suppose. But it also, at least you've got somebody to support you. I don't want to scaremonger people, because it's not very often that things go wrong. In all the times that I've been going out, I've had a couple of broken poles before that I've had the kit to repair them myself. I've had a problem where the stove didn't work, so I didn't have a hot meal that night, but I didn't die or anything. I had some water, and I always take things like some nuts or a little chocolate bar, Mars bar kind of thing, so you can have a little bit of calories inside you. It's usually nothing major that's going to go wrong, so you just have to try and make do. It's also good having kit that can double up for more than one thing. Water bottle, pee bottle, do you know what I mean? It's multi-use stuff that's got multiple uses is a good idea as well. So, but yeah, don't fear it. The only time I've ever bailed from a camp was nothing to do with my gear or an emergency. It was just I had a really eerie feeling that like you're sleeping on a graveyard or something. You think hands are going to come up and get you. I don't know why, because I've camped loads of times before and never had any sort of feeling like that. And I've camped loads of times after and never had any feeling like that. But then I just had to get off the North York moors and come home. So I don't know why, but it was what it was. If it doesn't feel right, you can come home.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world, and it's nothing to be embarrassed of or anything like that. Because you're going to enjoy yourself, and if you're not enjoying it, don't put yourself through it.
So we'll finish off on one last question, and this is one for yourself, but then also kind of Joe, really, in Joe's experience, are there any sort of specific tips or hints for women wanting to wild camp for the first time and doing it solo? Because I know that women find it hard, especially if I think we all know the reason why they find it hard. Anything you, Joe, would suggest? I know obviously outdoors dominated by sadly by men.
Would you do it on your own?
I personally wouldn't. I don't like it.
Yeah. So there are lots of communities out there, so you can go on to Facebook and things like that, and there are wild camping groups and communities. Now I've seen women post out there, is there anybody that can show me the ropes and go camping? And I've seen some blokes and that responding, and I'm thinking, just the safety element of it, I wouldn't be putting myself as a bloke in that situation, or them shouldn't be putting themselves. There are dedicated women that you can meet up with and share the experience with, but you just need to be careful and do your homework on that kind of thing. But I've seen them on the groups that there are lots of the ladies that go out and do that, and they share the experience together, and which is great. But it's not just for middle-aged blokes with pot bellies that want a beer up on a mountain. There's women that love this too. As for going out there, there's certain safety things that you can do. If you want to post that you're out on Instagram and all that kind of stuff, don't do it on your way up or something, that I'm going to be on this place at this time. But you're telling everyone where you're going. Just go out the way, save your photos till you get home, and then share your experience. But I wouldn't worry about it too much, because there's not, like I said, I've never met an axe murderer up there.
The worst thing is going to the bathroom.
Oh yeah, that's a tough one, that, isn't it? We've already mentioned shiwis though, haven't we?
If anyone didn't hear that, was
for me, that was the worst bit. Is how do I go to the loo? And it took ages for me to get. You made me.
Yeah.
Because you were
I
like,
kept saying, I'm watching. She's panicking.
We had to pull our trousers a bit further down. But there are devices we have already spoke about that are out there that can help with that. Again, practice before you go.
Oh yeah, not in your sleeping bag.
No.
It looks like a work of art.
But I think once you get to that bit, then there's no stopping you.
Yeah.
So if anyone didn't hear that, I was going to the toilet can be hard. So just practice before you go.
Yeah. And you can get devices to help you.
Yeah, there you go. Lovely. Well, thank you very much, Paul.
Brilliant.
And thank you for everyone online on the webinar for coming along.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up there, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks for the next one. Cheers.